After getting caught with drugs, a teenager is sent to prep school by his strict father. Listen as we chat about checking your phone during movie trailers, my feelings about 70s rock, and evil blonde boys in movies. Then we see if 1999's Outside Providence stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says Gladiator with the glutton. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Test of Time podcast. My name is Alan Noah. I am outside New York City, and joining me, as always, is my friend James Brief.
Hello, Al. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Test of Time. You know, I've said this before to you, and I don't watch trailers. Well, that's not entirely true. I don't watch trailers of movies that I either know I'm going to see or I have a pretty good chance that someday I'm going to see this in the relative future, a year or two on streaming or something. If it's a movie that I've never heard of completely, then actually I will watch a trailer. I will say, let's see if you can get me interested. Hopefully you don't give me too much of the film. And sometimes I think trailers give away the entire film.
Right.
Sometimes people want that, but I don't. And the theater lights are usually still on for the trailers, or at least they're not dimmed all the way. And I'll put my hand over my phone and look at just look at something to distract myself. I'll look at like some text, black background, like a Reddit app or something. I'll turn my brightness all the way down. Let me ask you, Al, do you think that that's rude? I don't look at my phone at all during a feature presentation, but what do you think about trailers, looking at your phone during a trailer?
I guess it's fine. I do feel like there's some leeway with the rules of watching a movie in a theater during the trailers, where if you have to get up and go to the bathroom or check your phone or talk to your friends, it's more okay during the trailers. Although I still don't love it when people are chatting, during the trailers. I like watching the trailers. I want to focus on that. If you're on your phone and the brightness is down and you're not really bothering anyone else, I guess it's fine. I think the big thing that would worry me is if I see someone doing that during the trailers, I'm automatically going to be clued into them and I'm going to be worried. Are they going to do that during the movie? And then I'm going to be thinking about that, and I don't want to think about that. So still somewhat distracting, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could stand up and be like, folks, I'm just doing this during the trailer. There will be no phone watching during the motion picture.
Why not just stand just outside the theater, wait for Nicole Kidman to start talking about the magic of movies, and then go in?
I guess I would maybe do that plan, but go after Nicole Kidman is almost done. I definitely go to theaters late, especially if there's reserved seating. Like, I will ask them how many minutes of previews there are, and they say 15 minutes of previews. I will go in after 13 minutes, and I'll just sit there and look down for 2 minutes. But if I'm going with a companion, I'm not going to be like, I'll be back in 20 minutes. That's how long these trailers are. They're 20 minutes or longer.
If you're on a date, you can offer to buy her popcorn or something. I don't know.
Oh, I always do. I always say, you get the seats. I really don't care about missing the trailer.
Okay.
But I was just wondering, I don't think it's that bad. And you're giving me the, I guess it's okay. So I will take that begrudging acceptance that what I'm doing is okay.
I guess it's fine. I think you're better off standing outside the movie theater. But speaking of being outside of things, let's talk about Outside Providence. Boom! That was a good segue. It wasn't that good. But this was a movie that I wanted to talk about because I saw that it was having its 25th anniversary, and I think that it is a kind of forgotten movie. I remember watching it with Courtney early on in our relationship. I remember watching it on VHS in her apartment on like a tiny little TV VCR combo. It was like adorable, but also kind of annoying that the screen was so small. And I feel like I said something similar a couple weeks ago when we talked about Garden State, but I love this soundtrack. I have it here with me. I mean, I don't really know the point of having props on an audio podcast, but you can see, James, I have the soundtrack on CD still on my CD shelf. But you had never seen this movie, right?
No, I'd never seen it. I actually, if you asked me what Outside Providence was, I probably would have guessed it was a 90s television show on CBS or something.
Okay.
Like Northern Exposure, Outside Providence, like coming to CBS this fall. And it turned out to be a Miramax film. But who I was shocked was involved in this film is the Farrelly brothers, Peter and Bobby Farrelly. They're best known for There's Something About Mary and
Dumb and Dumber, Kingpin.
Then they had a series of maybe slightly less successful films.
Yeah, Me, Myself, and Irene, Shallow Hal, Stuck on You.
Right. And then Dumb and Dumber 2, T.O. This is a very big departure in my mind for the Farrelly brothers. Of course, they didn't direct it or write this film.
No, they did write it.
Oh, they did write it. Oh, I didn't realize they wrote it too.
Yes, and actually, the movie is based on a book that Peter Farrelly wrote. It was a novel that was inspired by his youth, and then he adapted his own novel into the screenplay. But they didn't direct the movie because the Farrellys were busy working on There's Something About Mary. This movie was directed by Michael Corrente. But why don't you tell our listeners what Outside Providence is about, James?
Yeah, so if you're like me and you haven't seen this film before, Outside Providence takes place in the 1970s in New England and follows the story of Timothy Dunphy, also known as Dumph or Dildo. Dumph is a teenager and troublemaker who spends most of his time hanging out with his stoner friends outside of Providence, as the title says. Providence, Rhode Island, of course.
Right.
After crashing his car into a police cruiser, his father, Old Man Dunphy, played by Alec Baldwin, he decides to send him to a strict boarding school called Cornwall Academy in Connecticut. At Cornwall, Dumph initially struggles to fit in with the wealthy, privileged students and the rigorous academic environment. But over time, he befriends his roommate, a nerdy but kind-hearted student named Irv, and begins a romance with a girl named Jane Weston. When they're all caught smoking marijuana and only Jane is punished, Dumph goes to Brown University to have her admission there reinstated. Through his experience at Cornwall, Dumph learns there's more to life than just getting stoned and goofing off, and he decides to enroll in community college.
Right. And I don't need to ask you how this movie did at the box office because I know that it was a bomb and it did not do well, right?
It had a $7 million budget, and it opened at number 11 on September 1st, 1999, with $2.6 million. It wound up making $7.3 million domestically. So it didn't launch any careers, but it probably wasn't one of those, like, you're never directing again kind of bombs.
Gotcha.
But basically, forgotten in that I had never heard of it. I wouldn't say it's really in the zeitgeist.
No. And you said the movie had a $7 million budget. It's really a lot of no-name actors, except for Alec Baldwin. I mean, I guess George Wendt, is well known from Cheers, but I don't think he's demanding millions of dollars in salary. I have to think that most of that budget went to music clearance. The soundtrack has a ton of songs in it. Like, there's just a lot of needle drops, and not all of the bands are huge names, but there is The Who and Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner and Paul McCartney and Wings. So they presumably had to pay a lot of money for many of these songs. What did you think of the soundtrack?
It was fine.
Fine.
It was like all 70s stuff, right?
Yeah, but like amazing songs. There's a few sleepers on there. I'd Love to Change the World by 10 Years After and Dancing in the Moonlight by King Harvest. I love that song. And I don't know that I was really familiar with it before this movie.
Yeah, I mean it's a soundtrack I think I like, but I think you appreciate a little more. When I'm home alone listening to music, if I turn on Spotify, I will definitely turn on 90s rock, 2000s rock. I will turn on 60s rock. I generally don't put on 70s rock. While I like
Okay.
70s and I appreciate Zeppelin, Steely Dan, and all that stuff, I like it, but I'm not, holy shit, look at the soundtrack, the way I might say Forrest Gump soundtrack, to me, is a lot better than a soundtrack like this.
Both this movie and Forrest Gump have Sweet Home Alabama
That's a great song.
in the movie, not on the soundtrack album. The soundtrack album only has Freebird.
Yeah, I think the soundtrack is, yeah, it's very good. I actually didn't think of it too much, but I did like it as I was watching it. There's a couple other cast members that really stand out to me. One, Richard Jenkins. I love him. He's just always great. But another guy I was so happy to see, poor Jonathan Brandis. He had a small role in this. Poor guy. He was a big child star. He was cut from a couple films that were semi-big. His roles were just cut out, and he was so depressed. And he auditioned for Anakin Skywalker. He did kill himself, apparently. In this film, I do want to say he has a beard, and they even make note of it. They're like, "What the hell is that on your face?" Like, I think the men are like, "What, you wearing a beard so that the women know that you're a man?"
Is that when they're saying that if you have a beard, you are, and the word they use is queer? That comes up in like the dad's poker game, Alec Baldwin, George Wendt, and all of those guys. That conversation gets pretty awkward pretty quickly. And, there are some 70s cultural references. They talk about Jim Nabors and Rock Hudson as maybe being gay. What? Are you sure? I don't think they're gay. Rock Hudson, he can have any girl he wants. Why would he be gay? Which obviously is not how that works. But they revisit that theme later on in the movie, and it's revealed that George Wendt is gay. And you get to see the old man character, Alec Baldwin's character. He's just credited as Old Man Dunphy. He's very clearly trying to help out his friend, because there's one guy there who we are told in voiceover is connected, and he's really grilling George Wendt about, are you gay? Are you not? And then he says, yeah, I am. And Alec Baldwin is like, but you just mean you're kind of funny, right? Like he's trying to give him a lifeline so that his friends won't get mad. And then he says, no, I'm gay. Then he gets kicked out of the poker game. You feel bad for the character, but then there is sort of a nice moment later on in the movie where he's back. And you don't see exactly what happened, but it's implied that Alec Baldwin fought for him. He fought for his friend to come back and presumably said, who gives a shit? He's our friend. It's also in his house, so it's kind of weird that someone else would kick him out of the house. I've hung out in your apartment with people I didn't particularly care for, but I wouldn't kick them out of your apartment because who the fuck does that?
Right, exactly.
I think that storyline also kind of speaks to one of the movie's bigger themes, which is about identity and how other people define you and how that affects your impression of yourself. Because, the main character, his name is Tim, but nobody calls him Tim. His father calls him Dildo, which obviously affects his relationship with his dad, because of course it would. He's insulted by his dad all the time. He likes to go by Dunph, which is a better nickname, really. Then he has this roommate named Irving, who, when he tells the story, he had it made. He had friends, he had a girlfriend, he was loving life, and then he's caught in this shitty prank, and then everyone calls him Jizz, and then to hear him talk about it, that ruined his fucking life. And then there's this other character named Drugs. It's kind of maybe meant to be tongue-in-cheek of, ha ha ha, he loves drugs so much. But then that character dies in a fatal car accident because he's too high. So this idea of how other people define you, I thought that was pretty interesting. And I liked how the movie sort of explored that idea.
drugs. When he dies, Dunph comes back to town, and they have a little memorial, and it's kind of sweet. It's like, your buddies at 17 or so, or they're like, let's say something each about drugs, and they're like, yeah, he was always a partier, and it was like, they had nothing to actually say about him except that he just like was the crazy guy who got like drugs and alcohol. So I think that's the moment that Dump realizes that I think he's outgrown these guys.
He realizes that there's more to life, and that if all he does is just get high all the time and never takes anything seriously, he could follow drugs into an early grave. And, earlier in the movie, he gets into a car accident while he's super high and the car is filled with bong smoke. Then he hits the cop car. Then he ends up at boarding school. So, there is some precedent for that. There's reason for him to worry about that.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because this to me really seems like one of these films that is almost two separate films.
How so?
It's Dumph and it's his boys in Providence, and it's kind of got this Dazed and Confused thing going for it. Then you basically have, I feel like the second half of the film is a boarding school film. Obviously, it's connected, but for me, as someone who had never seen the film and had absolutely no idea what to expect, I'm not saying necessarily this is a bad thing. I happen to really like the boarding school genre. I think it's a really interesting place to introduce a cast of just really interesting characters from all walks of life. But I was not expecting this at all. So for me, the movie took a very hard right, and it's like, oh wow, this is a fish out of water film of a boy in a prep school.
I guess to me it was surprising because I had seen this movie so long ago, I really didn't remember anything other than liking the soundtrack. But so much of the movie takes place in Connecticut, and the movie's called Outside Providence. I was expecting more of it to be in Rhode Island, but who cares? It's all New England. I guess technically Connecticut is outside Providence. I guess technically so is Antarctica.
Right. I was thinking something similar. I kept wondering, like, are they going to get more back to Providence? I wasn't bothered by it, but, there are little snippets of them going back to the dad and the poker game and that scene with George Wendt's character coming out. But it really becomes more of a prep school film. I really thought that this film was two separate films, in my opinion.
Speaking of things that we were expecting or not expecting, I was really expecting at the end of the movie when Dunph is talking to the nasty headmaster and he says, I know the story about Billy Fu and that his dad is a mega donor and you're not going to kick him out of the school no matter what. You're probably just going to punish the rest of us. I was expecting the headmaster to start laughing and be like, what the fuck are you talking about? His dad isn't a major donor. He lied to you. But apparently he wasn't lying and his dad is a mega donor. I just sort of thought that might have made for an interesting reveal. That doesn't happen. The reveal is that his friend Wheeler turns out to be a douchebag who ratted out his friend, so he would get a good letter of recommendation and he wouldn't get punished and they would all get in trouble. And I kind of saw that coming just because of the way that it's shot, and you see Wheeler out at the phone and he kind of looks at the guy's office and then he just so happens to walk into the room after everyone gets busted and is like, oh, I was just here to study. And, kind of runs off. It wasn't much of a surprise there.
He kind of is the blonde character. I hate to say it, but he is the William Zabka character, in Karate Kid and Back to School, and she's one of the guys. Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter films. I hate to say it, it's a stereotype. It's the blonde evil character. I kind of was wondering, is this guy a bad guy? Because usually they cast this, and I was kind of like, oh, bad James, you thinking that they were going to do, oh, there it is.
Let's talk a little bit about the love story between Dunph and Jane. I think she goes by Janie a couple times, played by Amy Smart. I know Amy Smart from this movie and Road Trip. First off, she's beautiful. Also, I feel like her character is just so lovable. Like, you instantly get why Dunph would fall for her, not just because she's pretty, but because she's just cool and down to earth, and she's into studying, and she wants to get good grades, and she wants to get in a good college, but she's not obnoxious about it. She just seems like a really fun person to be around. And I feel like I mentioned this when we were talking with Kevin Smokler in the Valley Girl episode recently. I feel like teen romances, they can make me roll my eyes. I wasn't rolling my eyes at this one. I like their relationship. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought she was believable. The one thing I didn't like about her character was towards the end, he invites her up to his room for a second, and really she's only there for like a minute, but she smokes a little weed, and just then she's caught by the headmaster, so she winds up getting kicked out of Brown University after being accepted.
They rescind her acceptance.
Yeah, they rescind her acceptance only because Brown doesn't like investigate this stuff. Like the headmaster at the school specifically wrote a letter saying, "Don't accept this hooligan." But when Dunph goes up to her and is like, "I'm so sorry for what happened, and I'll try to fix it," and she's like, "No, it is completely my fault. I accept 100% responsibility." I just didn't think a 17-year-old would do that. Good for her that she did. You know, it was so unfair that everything she did to get into Brown University was erased by that one moment. And she was like, "Nope, it is completely my decision what I did, and I made the wrong decision."
She doesn't say it's completely my fault. She says, I went in there. So she accepts some responsibility. And from her face, she clearly blames him. Verbally, she's accepting some of the blame, but she knows that it is, in fact, partially or mostly, I guess, depending on how you look at it, his fault too. And, you know, when he goes to Brown and begs the dean to let her in, that's so unrealistic. There's no way that in real life they would reinstate their rescinded admission at that point. I kind of didn't mind it, though, just because Dunph has been through so much and he's just been shat upon the entire movie, and you kind of want him to have a win. And also, it's not even really a win for him. I mean, it is kind of, but it's really more of a win for Jane, and she didn't deserve it. She didn't deserve to get kicked out of Brown or to not be accepted into Brown. So even though that's kind of an eye roll worthy thing that would only happen in a movie, I was like, it's fine. He gets her back in. She forgives him. They kiss and make up. Sure, whatever. I'm fine with that.
I agree with you. The moment that happened, I was thinking the exact same thing, Al.
One other thing about Jane, when Dunph's friends are talking about his new girlfriend, they ask him about her helmet, her toilet, and her fun bags. I have never in my life heard that kind of description. Fun bags equals boobs. I get it. But her helmet and her toilet, I assume they're talking about her face and her butt. But Jesus Christ, that is fucking gross and awful. I hated that, but I wrote it down because I just had never heard anything like that before.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what they're referring to. And I guess toilet could be either of the lower orifices, I guess.
I mean, they're not talking about her urethra, I assume.
Yeah, like those 17-year-olds know the difference between a female urethra and a vagina.
Right.
What the fuck is helmet? What the fuck does that mean?
Her hair?
I don't get it. Is a helmet an ass? I don't. It's not an ass because I guess we are going to assume the toilet is the butt. I think there's way too much time we're spending talking about this.
I think not enough, quite frankly. All right, well, let's talk about something else. I wanted to ask you what you thought about Old Man, the dad, Alec Baldwin's character. What'd you think of him?
I like Alec Baldwin as an actor. In this film, though, his accent to me, it sounded like an SNL sketch that he was doing. I almost kind of wanted to laugh at it because it was kind of, hey, yo, like this. And in terms of the character, he's the guy that's like, of course I'm going to have the morals of someone in 1999 and my friend, the gay man, that's perfectly fine. I guess that was fine, but there was really nothing that really hinted that he was going to be that guy beforehand, because he's like, he calls his son dildo, and it was nice to see that he's protecting his friend, George Wendt, the gay guy. I know what they were going for in the film, but he was the like wise old man, wise mentor, but I didn't love it.
I hear what you're saying on the accent. A Providence accent is, I guess, different from a Boston accent, and all bad New England accents sound like bad New England accents. So I can't really argue with you there. But I really like the character, and I disagree with you saying that they were making him like the wise old man, the wise old mentor. I don't think that's it. I think that they show him as a really deeply, deeply flawed father figure. He calls his son dildo, which is fucking nasty. He is not really there for his kids at all. But then you get the backstory about his wife who committed suicide, and she was agoraphobic, and he loved her so very much, and he wanted to be there for her, but he just was miserable. And then his younger son was in this horrible accident, and he's in a wheelchair. And in a lot of ways, he is progressive for 1974. Kind of to your point, yeah, he has the 1999 values about, accepting his gay friend. He also describes his wife as being mentally ill, which I don't know how often that phrase was used in the mid-70s. I have no idea. I wasn't alive then. When he's giving Dunn sex advice, he says that sex is like Chinese dinner. You both got to get your cookies before it's over. That's not what you would expect from this guy. And this guy is trying. And very, very often he is too little, too late with his effort. Like how he doesn't stand up for George Wendt the first time when he should have, but then he invites him back. He shows up for the graduation at the very end of the movie, but he arrives too late. So like he's trying, he's doing his best. His best is not good enough, but he's not a complete asshole dad. So I liked the way that they portrayed him as just a realistic dude who's trying and very often failing, but his heart's in the right place.
Yeah, I mean, I did like the very end. Dumph, he's going to go off to junior college. His dad is so proud of him. He does something I thought was very cute. Now, the father and son both kind of misuse words in very blink and you miss it moments. I think when they're all maybe smoking some weed and Dumph says to his friends, "Oh my God, you've just got to savor the moment," instead of savor the moment.
Right.
And the old man Dumph at the end, he's like, you filled out the application, because Dumph says all you had to do was fill out the application to get in. So the dad says, no, that's good. You showed initiation instead of initiative. Right. To me, those little things tell me a lot more about old man Dumph than any exposition that's going to be any voiceovers. I definitely want to ask you about that. This film does have voiceovers.
Yeah, the voiceover isn't great. It's doing the thing that annoys me about voiceovers, where it's telling you stuff that you can see. By and large, there's a little bit of just early in the movie, it's just kind of setting the stage of, here's me and here's my brother. He was in an accident, and that's why he's in a wheelchair, and yada, yada, yada. Like, okay, you could have explained this better and in a more clever way without voiceover. Oh, well, let me ask you, James, what you think about the movie as a whole. Do you think Outside Providence stands the test of time?
I've said it before, there's kind of two different movies. It's your Providence suburb, and then it's got your prep school film. I feel like neither of these films are as good as I've seen in other films. I just didn't really connect with that stoner group. I felt like it should have been a little more fun. I should have liked those characters a little more. I know you're supposed to think they're losers, but I should have thought they should have been a little bit more charming losers, in my opinion. The boarding school film, it had other tropes. It had him befriending the nerd and helping him out, and the double-crossing blonde guy and the evil professor. I just felt like other films have done it a little bit better. I'm not upset I saw it. It's not a bad film, but it's a 5 out of 10 for me, this film. For me, unfortunately, Outside Providence does not stand the test of time. What do you think, Al? I know you said you saw it years ago on a date with your lovely wife, and you two are still happily married. And is your thoughts of Outside Providence still as happy as the day you married Courtney?
What?
Is your love of Outside Providence, has it endured all the trials and tribulations of marriage and children and moving and life, Al? Tell me how these two parallel each other.
I don't know how to answer that fucking question, man. What the hell was that?
All right, then tell me, does Outside Providence stand the test of time?
I mean, that one I can answer. Yes, I think it does. I think that this is a perfectly sweet coming of age movie. The different elements didn't bother me at all, like it seems to have bothered you, where yeah, he's got his friends from home and he's got his prep school friends, and I really like the scene when he introduces them all and they all get together and they all have a party. I mean, I felt like that was pretty relatable. I have my friends from high school, I have you and my friends from college, and you know all of my high school friends, and you're friends with them, and cool, neat. Like, that happens sometimes, and I like that. The movie takes place in 1974 in Providence and Connecticut. If this movie took place in 1999 in Tucson, Arizona, or if it took place in 2024 in Minnesota or Alaska or something, it would pretty much be the same movie. You know, you'd have to change the fashion and the hair and the soundtrack and maybe a couple of the cultural references, but by and large, in terms of major plot points, you could lift everything and the movie would still work. There's nothing about this movie that really ties it to the 70s in a way that I think hurts the movie. It's maybe not the best coming of age movie, but I also think that it's a pretty damn good one. Apparently, there was a little bit of a back and forth between Harvey Weinstein, who produced the movie for Miramax, and the Farrellys, where the Farrellys kind of wanted this movie to be a little bit more of a conventional coming of age movie, and the Weinsteins wanted it to be more slapsticky and gross out like Dumb and Dumber and There's Something About Mary, because those were big hits. And I can kind of see that, but the movie isn't really slapsticky. It's not like Dumb and Dumber or There's Something About Mary. There's a couple of little gags that are maybe in that vein, you know, when they're smoking out of a bong, which is really just a giant barrel that's hidden in this tree. Okay, that's kind of silly comedy. There's a couple of gags with the brother who's in a wheelchair. They hitchhike a lot. I guess maybe that's one thing that doesn't stand the test of time. But he's in the back of a pickup truck, and then when the pickup truck stops, the wheelchair rolls and he kind of slams into the front bed of the truck. They kind of repeat that gag a couple of times. That's a little slapsticky, but it made me chuckle. Yeah, I think the movie is funny. I think it's sweet. I think it actually kind of does have a bit of a message, you know, in air quotes. It deals with some serious topics, but not in a way that's preachy. I like it. I like this movie. I think it's kind of a shame that it's this sort of forgotten movie. I love the soundtrack. I'd recommend it. I would recommend that people watch this movie if you're a fan of stoner comedies, coming of age movies, prep school movies, 1970s movies, Alec Baldwin, just in general. I would say check this movie out. I think it's entertaining, and I think it does stand the test of time. So that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we are going to talk about Leap of Faith, a movie starring Steve Martin that I am pretty sure I've never seen. You've seen this one?
I saw it like once. I don't really remember much about it. Do you know anything about it, Al?
He's like a preacher, right? Like a fake televangelist preacher?
Something like that, but it's Steve Martin. So I'm excited to see it and to see if it stands the test of time.
I am too. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Let us know your thoughts about prep schools and smoking weed and getting your girlfriend into Brown University and checking your phone during movie trailers. We always love hearing from you. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.